This is Oblique. It's a block game about the campaigns of Frederick the Great. There are 8 scenarios, so it's a fair amount of game. My working title for this project was Supply Lines of Frederick the Great. Like my earlier Supply Lines games, it's a logistics-driven cat-and-mouse game that doesn't protect you from the consequences of your actions. You make a tiny mistake, or your opponent makes a brilliant move, and your position will destabilize very quickly. It's something I really love in head-to-head competitive games. It gives each decision this agonizing weight and tension. And if that's not for you, probably stay away from this one. For the rest of you, let me tell you a little bit about how it works. On your go, you get to move all the blocks in one city to adjacent cities. Sometimes the paths between cities have these midpoints, and usually you can just pass over them, but if an enemy block or garrison is adjacent to that point, you have to end your turn there. So, most basic level, that's a turn, one move. However, you can move multiple groups all in one go if they share a line of communication. That's an uninterrupted line connecting those blocks without passing through enemy pieces. So cutting off that line reduces what your opponent can do each turn. Now, if you want to attack, you need to move supply to your blocks via a line of supply. This works exactly like a line of communication, except also you can't pass through a point adjacent to the enemy. You can, however, move supplies along rivers, but only in the direction that that river flows. Getting trapped without supply means you can't attack. And if you are attacked, you're going to take losses to each block before fighting the battle, and you don't want to do that. Now, when you're attacked, you can try to escape. If you roll equal to or less than the number of blocks attacking you, you get away. But let's say your opponent has a good line of communication, and good lines of supply, and enough supply pieces to converge with 3 different armies. You'll need to roll separately against each of these. And if any of these rolls fail, you've got to fight all 3 of them. So let's talk battles. Your blocks have different numbers and types of units on them: infantry, cavalry, guards, and you can deploy them into these sectors as sticks. Each player has 12 good sticks, well-trained forces, and 12 bad ones, raw recruits. Once the fighting starts, on your turn you'll go left to right through each sector and compare strengths modified by terrain. There's no dice here, just quick, simple math. Your opponent then resolves the hits by removing sticks and reducing elite units. Some sectors can take the hits up a half of adjacent ones, and this is important because once the center is broken or a flank is turned, you lose. So this is pretty front-loaded. You screw up your deployment and you will lose the battle. You can buy yourself some wiggle room by using your leaders. They'll call up reserves in the middle of the battle, inspire your troops, or shift forces along your line. Removed sticks go onto your despair track, and this determines how many hits your blocks will take. Losing a battle or losing blocks will increase your disc on the track, which means you can survive fewer hits in the next battle, and your garrisons under siege become more likely to capitulate. Once you start losing, it's very easy to keep losing, so one option you have during these battles is to abandon the field. Minimize your losses, preserve your army. Knowing when to do this is a really key skill. You might be wondering, Amabel, how long is this game? Well, that depends. At the end of every Prussian turn, you roll a die, and advance the time disc that number of spaces, stopping at every multiple of 5. There are 25 spaces on the track, but the last space has to be landed on exactly. So sometimes the game lasts only 5 turns. That's really fast. There's a 0.2% chance of that happening though. It could also last 25 turns or more, but the chances of that happening are so small that my calculator gave up. Just started throwing letters into the mix. The last stable number it gave me when I was trying to figure out the odds of a 25-turn game was 1 in 3 quadrillion, 656 trillion, 158 billion, 440 million, 62,976. I don't know what that is as a percentage. It's pretty small, I think. Most likely, the game will last around 9 or 10 turns, but you're never quite sure. The tempo of the game is erratic, because that's the tempo of 18th century campaigns. There's bursts of action and then lulls. Generals think they're on track, and then suddenly it's almost winter. When the disc lands on the 5, 10, 15, and 20, each side rolls on a scenario-specific event table. Maybe you gain some intelligence or lose men to desertion. The weather delays you, or you're blindsided by events in other theaters. Maybe Frederick has a really big feeling and spends the next 2 weeks being utterly impossible to deal with for everyone around him. I know, buddy, it's hard. These elements of unpredictability give the game its narrative texture, and having to navigate that makes the game hard to play well. And this is one of my favorite things about the game, and also, it's gonna drive some folks nuts. You know who you are. If this isn't for you, I get it, I do. For the rest of you, if you're a sucker for this kind of cat and mouse stuff, the bluff and maneuver, little mistakes and big moments that can decide everything in an instant, turning on a dime, I think you'll like this one.